Welcome to the International Teacher Podcast with your host, Matt the Family Guy, Kent the Cat Guy, Jacqueline from JP Mint, and Greg the Single Guy, bringing you episodes from around the world about the best kept secret in education. You got it, international teaching. Welcome to the show. All right, welcome to the International Teacher Podcast episode. And you know what? I have Jacqueline here with me, but I don't have Kent. He's off with his cat, I don't know, doing something. And Jacqueline, welcome to the show this afternoon for me.
Thank you so much, Greg. I know I say this every time, but I'm really super duper fragilistic expialidocious excited
Not
about
again.
our guest.
Is this one of your best friends again, Jacqueline?
This is one of my best friends in the world.
I love your friends. Who is on our show today, Jacqueline?
Today, we are very honored to have my friend Sharon in Thailand, but we're not going to say she's from anywhere in the US because, like you, Greg, she's an Army brat.
Oh, yeah. Hey, welcome, Sharon. How are you?
Thank you. I'm so great. Really happy to be here.
What branch were you as an Army brat?
My dad was infantry. Yeah, okay. Army brat.
Army. Me too, Army brat. Did you grow up on different bases around the world or the States or the places like that?
Yeah, we moved 25 times before I graduated from high school. So yeah, we were.
I feel like I know you already. I know you. I already know you. Maybe we were in the same school.
I know we've gone to the same school. The same schools. Where did you graduate high school?
Well, my dad left the Army. Well, retired from the Army and went into the reservists in Kansas. So we moved up to Wisconsin, where family was from. And then the war hits, and my dad gets called up for Saudi, and he ends up going overseas to Saudi, and my mom's up there. And then he got called again and sent to Germany. And I was like, well, reservist, but he was trying to be like I think he was moving up in rank, and that retirement package and all that stuff, the pension was just too good to give up. So he had stayed in it and goes off once a month to go, train with the soldiers. And that was what we thought was going to happen. But then the war hit. I mean, Germany was the only time that we were overseas with the Army. Other than that, it was around the States.
Where were you in Germany?
We were in Heidelberg, and we,
we were neighbors.
It's awesome. Yeah. So I really feel attached to you already, and I think it's going to be great to have you on the show to talk about all the different places you've been, because I bet like Jacqueline and I have been all over the world, and you have too, I bet. Not just with the Army. And that's what I want to talk. Can you do me a favor? Can you tell our listeners the elevator version of how you got into international and where you're at now?
As you know, as a military kid, it gets in your blood. It's really, really hard to settle down anywhere. So coincidentally, I ended up in Kansas because my dad was stationed there. And I went to college there, met my husband. And in our wedding vows, I made him promise to follow me wherever I went because I knew I couldn't stay in one place forever.
Did he agree, or was it somebody else that agreed?
He was like, sure, whatever. But he didn't believe anything would ever really come of it. So I became a journalist, and I worked as a journalist for 12 years in Kansas. And then my parents were actually in Saudi Arabia. And my two little sisters, who are much younger than me, went to boarding school in Switzerland at, are we allowed to say school names? Not sure.
Sure, if you want to. Yeah, I do it all the time.
Okay, so my little sisters were at Lausanne American School. And I didn't really know anything about international schools because I grew up as a military kid in the DOD system. So I went to DOD schools.
Which is the Department of Defense schools, right? And you're on American bases around the world. They have our own schools, just taught like with regular teachers that get a salary, like taxed and everything within DODs, right?
Right. And pretty much all the kids are children of American servicemen.
That don't want to be there usually. You're just like, you're there and you don't want to be. So you make a little America around you, right? Okay, go ahead.
Exactly. Yeah. So anyway, so I was working as a journalist, and my sisters were going to school in Switzerland. And when it came time for their graduation, we went over there, and I met all these international teachers at their school. And I was like, hello, how do I not know about this? And I said, as soon as I got home, I said to my husband, I'm going back to school, I'm becoming a teacher, and we're going overseas. And he was like, oh man. So, and he was already a teacher. So I went back to school, became a teacher, and the rest is history. So then we went to Istanbul, Turkey, which is where I met JP here. And then we did 4 years there. Then we did 4 years in Shanghai, China. And
Wait,
then
which school in Shanghai, China? Thank you very
Shanghai
much.
American School. Yeah. Shanghai American. Yes. Hold on. I have to look at my list so I don't mess it up. Okay.
These are good
Then
schools. You
we,
wrote it down. Okay, go ahead.
well, I didn't, you get flustered when you're with these celebrities. So, you know, so yeah, after China, I wanted to go to a small school. So we did 2 years in Laos, which was amazing. And then we did 5 years in India at the American Embassy School. And then 6 years at Nido de Águilas in Chile. And then I've been here 3 months at my new school here in Thailand. So Rumrudi International School.
So you're at Bangkok. You're at Bangkok at Ramrudi right now. And I have
Correct.
friends that did you just leave Nido? I mean,
Yes.
you did. Okay. You've named some really important schools, right? Wow.
I know, we were so lucky. I have a superpower where I can pretty much manifest whatever I want in the world, and I manifested all of those jobs. I was like, I want to work at Vientiane International School. Boom. I want to work at American Embassy School. Boom. It just happened.
Would you
So,
do me a
yeah,
favor? Would you manifest me a beer right now?
I actually have some in
No,
my coffee cup.
that's you. That's not me. I'm
Sorry. Yeah. Anyway, so after Chile, I took a year off before coming to Thailand. So I took a gap year and worked with horses. So random.
and the word for that is equine
Equine
studies,
study.
right? Yes, I
Yes.
love that word, equine.
Yes.
It's a
I know.
QU word. Do you guys know about the QU wedding? The elementary book called The QU
Yes.
Wedding? I was at a school in Venezuela. I was at a school, and we used to have a wedding with the kindergarten with the preschoolers, and they would dress them up and celebrate Q and U, and
That's
our
adorable.
superintendent would stand up there and do the speech for the whole audience, all the parents and all the kids dressed up, and he's like, "The quintessential list of Q words, please remain quiet and quickly find your seats," etcetera, just every QU
Oh,
word. But
that's
you've been around the
adorable.
block. I know, isn't that awesome? So what do
Yeah.
you teach then? Have you taught a broad spectrum, and your husband's a teacher, so you're a teaching couple, right?
Well,
Mhm.
it's complicated.
Of
So
course.
yes. My husband is a teacher, and we were a teaching couple all the way until now. So when I took my year off last year, he was also going to take a year off and pursue one of his passions, which is another word maybe you don't know, lutherie, which is the building of guitars.
I was going to
And
say violins.
well, it's stringed instruments,
I
yes.
have a
Okay. All
question.
right.
I have a question. Is it equine lutherie, or he's doing it on the back of a horse, or was it just lutherie?
That would be amazing. We should
That
invent
would be
that.
Fabio. Wouldn't that be Fabio on the back of a horse with his
Right?
long hair,
Rolling in the
tuning an
wind.
instrument?
Anyway, last minute, instead of doing that, he got offered a job here in Bangkok at KIS. We were friends with the head of school at the time. And so he said, I think I'm going to go. And I was like, you can't go to Thailand without me. We were traveling here one time, and I said, all of my future happiness hinges on getting a job in this country. And he was like, God, no pressure. And then we just didn't over the years. So here I am in Florida doing the equine studies program, and Tony took off and went to Thailand. So when it came time to go, I'm like shortening my equine studies story. Basically, a lot of things happened that made me decide I wanted to go back to teaching. And I actually was looking at Mexico because I really feel like they're my people. And I knew Jack was there, and JP, Jacqueline was there. And um, I love learning Spanish. I didn't want to lose my Spanish, so I was thinking about Mexico. But in the meantime, my brother is also an international teacher, and he was in Abu Dhabi, and a couple of his friends are now administrators at our school here in Thailand. They reached out to my brother to offer him a job, and he said, I can't go right now. My wife is doing a master's program, but my sister's looking for a job. So then we connected and interviewed online, and boom, they gave me a job here. So we have this weird thing now where my husband's at a different school, but it's all awesome.
You're
So
still a teaching couple. Yeah,
I
and
guess
and when I talk about teaching couples, I mean about getting not just like going to a job fair or most of the time you're going to one school, but Bangkok has so many schools
true.
within a certain area, if not all over the city, but the international schools, there's quite a few that are very well known and well established, right? So you're at Ramruti and he's at KIS?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And we have our own places. So we're
Yeah, they
living,
have their own places. That's what I thought I would include as well.
which
Yeah, they
I
have their
wanted
own
to pitch.
places.
I wanted to pitch this because it's awesome, you guys. It's like really great.
I've
So
got my own place too.
yeah, we live apart, but we get together every weekend and we have a lot of fun. So,
Yeah, they just went on a little weekend trip. Can you tell us about where you went for your weekend trip? Because I can't
oh,
even
the whole
pronounce
week,
it.
we got the week off. We went to a place called Kanchanaburi, which is out in the countryside. It's so beautiful, mountains, rivers, and we stayed at a horse farm because horses. We did some horseback riding, some hiking, went to some waterfalls, and it's also the location of the Death Railway, which is bleak. But do you know that movie, The Bridge on the River Kwai?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's where it took place. I actually knew about the movie, but I hadn't seen it, and I don't know any of the history until I went there. And it turns out it's World War II. Japanese used prisoners of war and Southeast Asian slave labor to build this railway between Thailand and Burma. And you can go and visit you can ride the train, which we did, and see the bridge. It's not the real bridge, but whatever. It was still cool. So,
Build a
yeah,
guitar, ride a horse. You got all that. It's all right there.
we should have brought a guitar. How did we forget that? Ah, yes.
That's what I'm here for. I'm here for guidance, and I'm not quite a consultant, but I do have a few ideas I like to share with our listeners and our guests, right?
Appreciate
Oh,
that.
Well, Greg, I want to tell you. Yeah, no, I want to tell you about because Sharon just kind of hinted at that. You might have heard that she said, "I didn't know about it until I got there." And the reason that she didn't know, or that when she got there, she started to learn, is because she has a website or a blog called The Guide Hog, and this is where Sharon and I both meet eye to eye. Is, Greg, when you go to a new country and you say, oh, I'm going to maybe sign up for a historical walk, or I'll go to this museum, but I really want a little bit more nuts and bolts. And you can get the audio guide, but sometimes you can get a live person. Well, Sharon and I both meet eye to eye on this, where we stand right next to that person and we pepper them with questions, because they just open our minds to all the good things that they know. And it's like, oh my gosh, I can just ask this person everything about this subject because they're the expert. So she's the guide hog because she hogs the guide for herself on this tour. And everybody else is just like, oh God, will this woman just stop asking this person questions?
It is so true. And there have been so many times when the guide is basically like, shut up. I remember in Italy, we were on a tour and the guide kept talking about Carrara marble. And I got obsessed with it. So I'd be like, is that Carrara marble? Is that Carrara marble? And finally she goes, it's not Carrera, it's Carrera or whatever. And I was like, oh, okay, never mind.
I have
He's
a
looking it
thousand
up. He's looking
questions.
it up.
No,
He's
I'm
looking
Oh,
not.
it
I'm
up.
I'm just trying to think of a story with that to bounce off of what you were saying with these guides. But before I do, I just want to ask that you already have the cat out of the bag there, JP, because you mentioned her website. So, Sharon, can you tell us, is this something that other people could sign in and like find out about, like traveling around as a teacher, or is it something else?
I don't know how useful it is for most people. To be honest, I write it for myself because I have no short term memory and I'm afraid someday I'll forget what I've done in my life. Sometimes people say things like, have you ever been to Cambodia? And I'm like, um, I think so. Let me check my blog. I'm like, oh yeah, I did go there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's not really that bad, but I'm afraid it will get to that point. So it's mostly just detailing our travels. I don't know if anybody reads it, but I like to think it's entertaining, if not useful.
I read it all the time. I love it because Sharon's writing style is just like what you're hearing right now, Greg. It's super easy to read and you just get enthused listening, or I should say, reading what she's writing about. And then because she's a guide hog, she'll put all these hyperlinks so that you can go off on a tangent and go check out all the research and everything else because she loves to learn. And this is why she's an amazing teacher.
Did you see when we were on the horseback trip, we thought they were growing marijuana everywhere? Because I don't know, I thought it looks like marijuana plants, and they legalized it in Thailand. So I was like, dang, everybody's growing marijuana. And Tony and I kept commenting on it. We're like, man, fields and fields and fields of this stuff. And he's like, well, you can buy it on every corner in Bangkok. They got to grow it somewhere. And then eventually we found out it is not marijuana. It's this tuber called cassava, which I never heard of. So yeah,
Oh,
I linked to a site where you can learn all about cassava, Jack.
I've actually eaten cassava in Africa. They eat it a
Okay,
lot there.
that's
It's
what I've
not
read. Yeah.
terribly tasty,
No, it's dry,
unfortunately.
right?
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
Anyway,
Greg is on. Greg is down a wormhole here. Sorry, folks, listeners, we have
But
lost
Sharon, you
Greg.
mentioned it. No, you didn't. You mentioned it, Sharon, that you have a website and you keep track of your life. It's sort of like a diary. And
yeah.
I did the same thing. Mine's called saintsomewhere.online. And
Oh,
we'll put
cool.
both of our websites out there for our listeners because if you haven't traveled overseas as a teacher, travel is amazing. And I do a newsletter every month to let my mom and dad know that I'm still alive and I'm not locked up somewhere. And we play basketball or baseball or I go travel around. And the point I was going to make is I was in I can't I'm drawing a blank on this country because you're like, anybody been to this place? Next to Italy, right? If you go to the east of Italy, they share a border with
Croatia,
Oh, you're good.
Croatia and not Croatia. It's above Croatia. It's Ljubljana is in there, and it's where they have the horses. This is goes in with your horse story, right? Your equine
Oh,
history. All of the beautiful Ljubljana horses are bred there in Ljubljana, and I can't remember the name of the country. Are you looking?
Serbia.
Because right, nope, it goes up and it has a border with Italy right there. Anyway, I went there, and one of the greatest thing was you would love this because they probably would have loved to have you on the tour. We went on a food tour in Ljubljana or right above Ljubljana. And it was like this 20 something that was sort of, in between school. And she was from the city and she took us around to like 6 or 7 different restaurants. And
oh,
they all knew we were coming because it was part of their guide. And you couldn't sit there and ask all these questions all the time because at some point you're sitting down in the restaurant eating and
oh,
drinking, and
how
it was all
dreamy.
inclusive, and it was a great tour. I loved it. So anyway, that was my relative connection to what you were saying about guided tours and Tour Hog. I think that's great that you do that, and you have a website that explains all these great things, and as well as I do. So I
Yeah,
do newsletters and put them on my website so that my mom and dad know that I'm okay and share them, and I don't have to email everybody because if you really care, you can go to the website and look at it. I have nothing to hide.
exactly.
So, yeah,
Oh,
that's what
cool.
I did.
Slovenia. Sorry.
Thank you. My
Serbia
God, I couldn't
Serbia is
remember.
way, way east of Croatia. Yeah.
Oh, Slovenia, if you go to the top in the northern part of Slovenia where it's right next to like above Ljubljana, there's the border
Oh,
of Italy, and that's where the Italians go to hang out because it's cheaper than even Italy. And what happens is you just hear Italian right around that border. It's just all Italian instead of just Slovenian. And it's amazing food and it's right on the water. So, yeah, it's a great place to go.
oh, sounds
Love
dreamy.
it.
Well,
Yes.
Yeah.
interestingly enough, just to bring this into recruiting, my little wheelhouse, those Eastern European countries, a lot of them still offer housing packages. They still offer like the dream
Oh,
benefit package. And the bonus is that you're in Europe and it's usually less expensive, as Greg has pointed out. So
oh,
those are very lucrative packages, and people are just, clamoring to get into those,
oh,
like Poland, the Czech Republic. And these are really great schools. Oh, he's found your page. There's the
aw,
horse.
Sweet.
I'll share it with you later. You're right. I don't mean to take away because we're in the middle of a conversation, but I just
No,
wanted to share. I'll share that website with you, Sharon, and
no.
we'll share later. But we'll put them in the show notes too if people even care. I don't know, but I would love to read your website and see what you've done,
Oh,
Jacqueline. JP, I love the fact you brought up the fact that living in the former Eastern Bloc countries, especially of centralized Europe, there are great packages. I was looking at a couple schools there when I was recruiting this last year just to see what I was worth because I've been here for 6 years or so. I thought I would take a moment to go to a job fair, which is my wheelhouse and yours, Sharon, probably. And I still don't get jobs of word of mouth. I go to job fairs still. And a
okay.
lot of the schools go to these job fairs and you get to find out these little places that you would never think of going to. Kazakhstan. I fell in love with Kazakhstan just by talking to the director for about 20 minutes about Kazakhstan, and she answered all my questions. I'm like, I want to go, right? I didn't end up going, but at some point, I can't wait to go and teach in Central Europe if I'm still not too old because there are age restrictions in many places. But Central Europe might be one of those places that doesn't have the age restriction of like 60 or 65, which I'm like 25 years away from, right? But in 25 years, when I have to think about that, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Did I laugh out loud? Sharon, do you have schools that are still on your list? Like, are you still
I was
thinking?
just gonna say
Mhm.
that that's the hardest part, I think, about approaching that retirement age, is there's still so many places I would love to go and work, but really the end is nigh. So my school here
We have to
has a
turn into coaches or consultants, right?
I
I think you
know.
can stay in Thailand for a long time,
Well, the country's cutoff is 60, but apparently
right?
individual
For work
schools
visa.
can tweak it. So our school lets you stay till you're 62, and then you can extend your contract annually, but you lose all your expat benefits. So after 62, you don't get housing or flights or any of that good stuff anymore. But still, that's not terrible. 62 possibly to 65. So, I mean, I've only been in this country for 3 months, but I don't know. So far, I'm feeling like I can do it. Then, of course, that rules out all these other cool places that I've always wanted to go. And we've never lived in Europe. I mean, I did as a kid, I lived in Germany, but as teachers, I've never lived in Europe. And it just sounds so amazing. So, yeah.
One of my bucket list schools is the Anglo-American school in Moscow, and not necessarily right now because of the Russia-Ukraine thing, right? It's not necessarily the time to be there, but I have had friends that have come and gone from there, and I've always wanted to work there, but it's never been on my radar. It may not be an option because I think they're also 60. Even if we have lots of listeners out there that are not even close, they're probably half our age. They're even 20 something and they're getting into the teaching field overseas. But it's great that we have this conversation and we might have to designate a whole episode just on that topic so that we're not flying all over the place, right? Because the three of us, if we're getting closer, like we're in our mid 40s right now and we're getting close and talking about, yeah, I know, we're in our 50s. I don't know, Sharon, how I don't
I'm
know if you
proud.
are,
I'm
but I am, I
51.
know.
I'm
Mhm.
Yeah.
56. Yeah. But you know what? I'm curious about you guys. I have strong opinions about this. Do you have advice you would give to young people who are just starting? So when they reach our age, they're not like, dang it, I wish I had done whatever.
Oh, well, let's start with you then. I bet you have some strong feelings. You're gonna wait for us, or do you wanna just start
Oh,
with
well,
you?
I feel really lucky that I started where I did, which was Turkey, because I feel like that is a young people school. We did have people who stayed forever. Jacqueline, do you know if they still let you do that?
I think so because the person that so it wasn't replaced me because I was a French teacher and I went to the Middle East. I went to Tazem in Oman, but they hired the Spanish teacher from Tazem to come to
Oh,
coach. Well, actually, I hired her because I was the head of department. So I was like,
okay.
"Hey, if we actually
Rich.
swap countries, we can swap stuff." So we swapped wine glasses,
Oh,
lamps, like
nice.
all the stuff that you don't have to really, be attached to. I think she's still there, and that was 2017.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
I'm confused. So
mhm.
what's the question? Like you
Okay,
wish
so my
you
point
had
was
known about that early?
no,
Okay.
okay, sorry, I digressed. Because at the time, there were people at our school in Turkey excuse me, you're spreading it to me, Jack. Um, there were people at our school in Turkey who were like past retirement age. So I wouldn't recommend that. What I if I were going to give advice to a young person getting started in international teaching, I would say hit Istanbul, then go to South America and do the South America gig, then go to Asia, make a whole bunch of money, or the Middle East, make a whole bunch of money, and then take your 40s on and go to Europe.
Mhm.
So, I mean, we unfortunately we went from these top tier high earning schools and we've just been going down, down ever since. Like not I'm not
Well, I
saying to
was gonna say
but
though, the South America at an early age is really tough because that's when you actually want a little bit of money to be able to travel and things. But
I was
South America
thinking,
doesn't offer a lot of great money.
no, I mean, I guess my point is when you're young, you can backpack and you can South
Mm.
America is such a great place for that kind of travel. And when we were there, I was like, "Oh, hell no, I don't backpack." I'm like, "Where are the fancy schmancy posh hotels?" So,
So are you partly saying like when you're younger, you want to be active and do things and not necessarily go for that nest egg? But I think, and Jacqueline will back me up on this, is that like Andrew Hallam will tell any teacher the first time you go overseas, right when you start overseas, even if you're making, if you go to Honduras like I did, I went 100 years ago, but if you're making less than $20,000 in a country, which a lot of international schools in certain parts of the world, you make maybe 20, and
mhm,
you can live really well and travel really well on that salary. But if you take just a little bit of that money and start saving it and start socking it away, then as you get older and with your plan, right, then you can keep gradually moving up and get to a well-paying school because you have more experience. Too,
mhm.
your opportunity is probably going to open up. And the only reason I'm saying all this is because I'm exactly the opposite of you, Sharon. I started off at making like 15,000 or something like that. In the local currency, it was six figures. I told my dad, I'm going to make six figures my first year of teaching. He's like, "What currency?" I'm like, "Shit." So I said 17 to 1, of course. So I was making 17 to 1, but in dollar, from the local to dollar, so I was making less than like 12 to $13,000, not including like insurance and stuff, but that was the salary. And I made enough money to be happy and travel and do all these great things when I was younger. Well, 30. Slowly and gradually, Sharon, I've moved up, and every year I've pretty much increased my salary, my value to the school, and the offerings got better. And you can get to these great, well paying schools that way. So I see what you mean. If you make a lot of money in the beginning of your journey and you stay overseas as a career like the three of us have, with maybe a break back in the States for a gap year or two or three or four, then that's a great plan and it works, but it just depends on the individual, right?
That's true, that's
So
true.
that's great advice.
I'm also not a good person to advise anybody about the financial side of this gig because I know you've been extremely responsible, Jacqueline, but we have not.
I
And
disagree. I completely disagree. You inspired me to buy land in my country. Americans and Canadians are quite different in more ways than one.
We speak English, you speak Canadian.
oh,
One of the things is to keep our non-residency. So I haven't filed a tax return in years. So to keep our non-residency, we cannot have a lot of residential ties to Canada, and one of those would be a house. So when
mhm.
I went overseas, I sold my little house. I had a house, sold it within a year of being overseas because I realized I wasn't going to be coming back. But I can buy land. And the reason I was inspired to buy land was because I was watching Sharon and Tony buying these beautiful properties, renting them out, or getting tenants, and then just kind of accumulating their wealth through real estate.
That's such a nice little dream that you just painted. what actually happened.
The real
Now for the
story.
real story.
Yes. No, it's true. We did have, if you're talking about our lake house, that was a
Hmm.
lovely property, and we had a lot of fun there. It was
In
a house
Michigan.
on a small lake in Michigan. We had it for 10 years. We did not rent it out. We used it for 1 month every year.
Oh,
So
no,
that
you
was
had a basement. You rented out the basement.
Oh, no, you know what? We had a guy, like a caretaker guy, and he stayed there for free in exchange for taking care of the house. So
So that was all before Airbnb stuff, right?
you know
Before
what?
that came onto the
Pretty
scene.
much, and we tried when Airbnb started becoming popular, I looked into it, but they said it just wasn't in a, desirable enough location. It was too
Got it.
far away from the college towns and the cool cities and everything, so
I'll go stay there. I don't have a place to stay in the States except for my family and
oh.
friends and crash on their couch. So I'll just go stay there next summer. What's the address?
Well, we don't have it anymore, but you know what we do have, Greg, and I know that you have family in Florida. We now do have an Airbnb in Florida in the happening town of the Villages, where you can go dancing
Nice.
every night with the 55 plus crowd. Woohoo!
That sounds like heaven for Greg. Look at him. Look at his face.
No, no, I don't want to be at the 55 over crowd. I want to be with like the 30-year-olds and hang out and drink.
You should see
Oh
how
my
these people
God.
are pretty. It is no joke. Yeah.
I
I've seen
believe you. And I love
photos.
Florida. All right, let's take a moment for a little commercial about how to get in touch with us. You can, of course, find all four of us at the itpexpat.com. That's www.itpexpat.com.
Or you could also find us at email at internationalteacherpodcast@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you.
Or if you're into Facebook, we have a new Facebook group at www.facebook.com/groups/ITPexpat, where you can find all kinds of inside information about ITP Expat.
You can also find us on Instagram at ITPXpats. That's with an S. ITPXpats is our handle.
All right, and thank you, listeners. We have over 100 countries represented by our listeners, and though we're not monetized, we are here for you, and we would like to thank all of you for listening. So let's get back to the show. Well, let's circle around. Your question for us, Sharon, was to give some advice to, and that was actually our question to guests. So you totally threw me for a loop there, but I love it. And I have strong feelings. Jacqueline, JP, why don't you go first? What do you think new teachers should right off the bat if they're thinking about overseas? What's one good piece of advice you could give them?
Okay, well, because my wheelhouse is your CV, I'm going to say please don't jump around. Don't do 2 years, 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 2 years. It's going to look terrible on your CV.
Mm.
You don't necessarily need to stay the 7 or the 8 years that I did. For example, I stayed 8 years at Coach, and then I stayed 7 years at TASM. So 2 schools in 15 years. That's not terribly realistic either. But I would say if you could stay at least 3 to 4, as Sharon and Tony did, they're kind of the ideal role models in that sense because they stayed a few years, made some, planted some roots, but not too deeply, and then moved to the next school. The reason I say that is because schools and admin and HRs, they're going to look at your CV and see, like, just if they see a whole lot of 2 year stints, they're going to think, what was wrong? Why did you leave at all these schools with just the minimum time?
Mhm.
Now, Greg, you pointed to yourself. Is that because your CV has 2 and 2 and 2? I don't remember doing
Maybe
that.
that's why it took me so long to get really valuable to a school. I had rough recruiting years, right? Because I'm a great guy, but I didn't always have a strong resume until I had more experience at different schools. My story is a little bit different. I agree with you. I think that the 2 year contract minimum for most schools, especially the better schools, have a 2 year contract minimum. So if you stay an extra year, then you're showing that you're dedicated enough to stay beyond the contract.
Mhm.
So it's not as much of a red flag for them. I did 3 years in Honduras, I did 1 in Egypt, and I fell into a school that was not the right fit for me, and I had to leave it. I mean, it was one of those make it or break it, and just I had to leave, so I went to Kuwait for 2,
Greg was
then I
trying to
went
find the right fit. Finding the right fit, www.amazon.com at your finer bookstores.
and, you joke about it, but you know what? I love the way you joke about it. The reason I called it the right fit was because I ran into one that wasn't the right fit, and everybody talks about schools that are right fit for you. And
Mm.
that leads as a segue into what my opinion is, because I come from that background where I have 2 years everywhere. Like, and it
Mhm.
started to get more and more because I had the travel bug. And when I did my interviews, I would explain the reason. I had it all backed up. I'm like, I traveled around because I stayed for 2 years there, fulfilled my contract. And during the interviews, that came up. So I had to really defend it. And I think the way I explained it to them was clear enough that, yeah, it's not my dream school. This is a great place to be. I've fulfilled my contract. I'm letting you know I have another school I'm going to. I let you know early that I was going to recruit, and they're usually on my side, right? Except for that 1 year. Anyway, that gets a segue into my advice for new teachers and for anybody in the international field. I'm going to echo what I've heard from thousands of people over the years, and I'm not kidding you. Most, and you guys can chime in on this, but you'll probably agree without any hesitation. When you look at schools, don't think you're just going to go on some European vacation. I want you to look at those schools that you never even knew were on the map.
Mhm.
If you don't know where Guam is, if you don't know where the little island of Fiji is, there are little schools in every country around the globe.
Mhm.
And there's some excellent schools in places that you've never heard of before.
Mhm.
So give them a try. Go to a recruiting fair, get to know a teacher that's been there and talk about it. But don't close the door and just go for those top tier schools. I call them
Mhm.
top tier, but the well acknowledged schools.
Mhm.
hmm
The number
How's
of
that for
times I've
advice?
heard people say, "Oh, I just want to go to the American school in Paris." And
Mhm.
I'm
Yes.
like, "But there's so much more out there."
Yeah.
Go on a vacation to Paris instead.
Mhm.
Don't go live there and teach at a school just because the lifestyle might be great, but when you go to Europe, and I speak from experience, Sharon, I lived in Switzerland for 3 years, 1 year past my contract, and it's more about the lifestyle. It's not making money because it's expensive, and they have different laws in every one of the European countries, different taxes, and life is not easy on a teaching salary, but the lifestyle's amazing, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Very amazing. So someday, Sharon, when you go and teach in Europe, you're gonna love it, right? Yes,
Ah,
you're gonna love it.
maybe someday. Maybe I'll just win the lottery and just move there.
Hey, where's the attitude that we heard before? Like, I make it happen for myself and
Yes,
drag
you
my husband.
manifest. Let me give you a suggestion of what you should manifest, Sharon. The
Let's hear.
American school in Vienna. And hear me out, because you speak German, you still have German dormant inside your brain somewhere. Es schlaft, but it's there. And then you could
Wo ist mein
uh
Deutsch? Yeah.
wo ist dein
Schildkröte.
Deutsch? Dein Deutsch ist schläft, not schlaft. So you could go to the American School of Vienna, that's German but Austrian, and you would have those gorgeous mountains, the Alps, and it is a great school. It's a small school, but it's a great school.
Yeah, twist my arm. I knew the principal there for a while, and I was like, "Oh, I need to get there while she's still principal," and it just didn't happen. That's the beauty of being old is we know people everywhere. So every time someone mentions a school, I'm like, "Oh yeah, I know somebody there. Oh yeah, my friend is the principal or whatever." So that's pretty fun, I have to say. I wish that were true when I was much younger. I wish I had started this when I was in my 20s. That's like my
So
biggest.
do I.
Yeah.
I wish I had, but it's not easy. The schools, at least in the States and maybe Canada, JP, I'm not sure, but in the States, our schools, our universities of education colleges are a part of a machine. And think about it. I mean, I didn't know about it. First of all, I didn't know about it because it is the best kept secret in education. That's our little tagline. But here's the story: is that if you don't hear this podcast, if you don't know somebody who went overseas, if you don't know what it's really about, then you're going to be part of that machine where the universities feed into the school districts around the state and around that city. and feed into the machine because they're training you to be a teacher so you can go and teach in the next district. This never comes up. I mean,
Yeah.
when I got hired in Honduras, I came back, it was like, I think it was February 1st. I'd come back from University of Iowa, and I went and did some mock interviews at my university. Right, my final semesters at school were all about getting prepared, taking master's courses as before I graduate with my certificate. Everybody in that room, there was 150 candidates to graduate from my school of education, and that year I was the only one that had a job in February because I went to a job fair to find a job overseas.
Mhm.
And everybody else is like waiting around till September to hear from a district that might have an opening.
Greg, how did you know about it?
I didn't. I found out about it at a cocktail party. That's the early story. The story is I was at a Christmas party in Green Bay. This guy says to me, "Oh, you like to teach? You like to travel? You should go to Iowa." I'm like, "Excuse me?" I had the same reaction, right? Sharon, like, "What? Iowa? Get out of here. Get the fuck out of here," right? You know, I threw the Oppenheimer in there. We can do that once in a while. So anyway, I went to Iowa and there was the whole world was represented at this recruiting fair and I knew nothing about it. I showed up, I had nowhere to stay. I didn't know I should stay at the hotel. I didn't have any money to stay at the hotel. I didn't know how to interview. I didn't even have a resume really ready to go. I threw it all together between Christmas and February 1st. I threw together a paper portfolio. I got there and I'm sitting at this table trying to figure out what to do next. I have an interview, maybe. I don't know. We're going to have to stand in line. And guy next to me has a stack of invitations, like 15 high, because he and his wife had been overseas to two different schools. And he sort of walked me through the ropes. That's another reason I wrote the book. It's because no one ever taught me at the time. There was no website about it. The only information you could get was from the recruiting agency
Yes,
and
dude,
then
I
through
wish your book had
experience.
been around 20 years ago. Yeah, there was no way to get that information.
I would have bought it.
Finding the right fit,
No, there we go
www.amazon.com.
again.
Yeah.
Sharon, can you tell us how many job fairs have you been to? Because I bet you actually,
Oh,
before you
yes.
tell us, Greg, can you guess how many Sharon and Tony have been to?
You're so funny.
First, tell me again, Sharon, how many schools have you been to?
I'm at my 6th school.
6 school. So you've been at a minimum of 5 job fairs because you got one by word of mouth at least,
Ah.
or or you went to several during one year because you didn't really find the right fit at one, so you went to a trailing. I'm gonna say, I think that's a possibility. I'm gonna say 7.
Oh, wow. You were underestimating my manifestation powers. So, no, we also did the University of Northern Iowa to get our jobs in Turkey and then also to get our jobs in China. And then since we were already in Asia, we went to Bangkok for the Search ISS combo, and we would register for both because we were so paranoid. And then we were so
Mhm.
lucky, and we'd get the jobs like the first day and cancel the other fair. So we got Laos at Search. That is a good story if we have time. And then
Oh, please tell.
we
Finish
went
your
to
list.
ISS for India, and then Chile was totally word of mouth. So we were in India, and a friend of mine got a job there, and he came running to my classroom, and he said, "They have an EAL position." I was like, "I'm not even recruiting," and he was like, come on, you should apply." And I was like, "Okay." So that just happened, and then this last time was the one where my brother's friends just dropped it in our lap. So, yeah,
Did you count, Greg? How many?
So is that 4 then?
yeah, yeah.
Oh, I see.
But, you know,
Okay.
I love job fairs. I kind of miss them. They're so fun and exciting, and the whole network.
Can I guess why? Can I guess why?
What
It's
do you
because you're surrounded by, not only is it the whole roller coaster of emotions and trying, like, what schools are out there and maybe getting an offer, maybe not, getting declined. It's that roller coaster of emotions. But what I truly enjoy about job fairs, and maybe for you too, I'm going to guess for you, it's the networking and talking to people that are doing the same thing you are
yeah,
and learning through them about what the other schools around the world are like. You sit next to a person, they're teaching in Abuja. You sit next to another person and they're teaching in Korea, and they've already been to Amsterdam and they already taught in Cambodia. And then somebody over here is talking about the island of Fiji or something.
yeah,
And it's crazy.
It's
right?
amazing. It's like
Is
the whole
is
world
that
is
it?
in one little hotel. Yeah, it's so fun. And it's really the only way to get that information in an easy.
Someone once asked me with when 2015 hit and I was in Switzerland and I was gearing up to go to ISS. ISS started their online recruiting, their online job fairs in between their face-to-face fairs. No one else had it. No one else thought about it. It's pre-COVID. 2015,
Wow.
they started doing their online stuff, and it really didn't click with me. I didn't like it. It was a
Mhm.
system was just getting started. Someone asked me, "Do you think they're going to have face fairs ever again?" Because, especially after COVID, people always thought we're not going to have any face to face fairs anymore.
Mhm.
And I disagree because these fairs know that the face to face interview is so important because when I interview with you or you interview with somebody else, it's face to face. There's body language that does not show up on video.
Mhm.
There are so many things to look at because you're on stage the whole time. You're in the elevator and you're going up to your room and you run into some director that
Right.
happens to be talking about a school you're interested in and they ask you to join the conversation and you're like, well, funny you should ask, I was just looking at your school, right? And it just happens. And you got me started on this, but the directors all go to job fairs and know each other and train beforehand sometimes, and they do this whole travel around to different job fairs to find the best people for them to fit their puzzle. And the thing is, they talk to each other. It's like, hey, I've got a great recruit I just ran into in the elevator. She's awesome. Her name is Sharon and her husband, and they make guitars and ride horses together, but they want to go overseas again. And it just happens that they're from Austria. The school's in Austria, and you're like, you had no idea, but this other director says you need to call Sharon and her husband. That happens at job fairs.
It totally does. Yep. It's so
Sorry,
fun.
I went way off on that because that's my favorite thing is job fairs. I would love to just go to job fairs.
I know. I kept thinking as you were talking, I'm like, what if they do cancel them forever? Can we like recreate that? I guess that would be like going to Irkos or one of those other big regional campuses. You know,
They won't fade away, in my opinion. I think it's too important to meet face to face,
yeah,
and they can't afford to fly teachers into their country. They
right,
can't afford to even fly more than a couple people, in most cases, one or two people to recruit
right.
to go back to the States or go to Bangkok or go to Dubai
Yeah,
to meet these candidates. So I think that the directors really feel that the face to face is important. And that's what these job fairs are so magical about.
yeah. It's pretty fun for sure.
Sharon,
I'm
you
a
you
big
bring
fan.
up a good point about PD and ERCOS and NISA and CIS. And in fact, in another podcast, I mentioned that job fairs and this kind of PD, those kind of PD conferences are another great way to build your network,
Yeah,
and then what you want to do is you add all these people on LinkedIn. So your link, I'm a LinkedIn touter or
Fanatic.
fanatic. What is it?
Fanatic.
Fanatic, thank you. I was like, frenetic, how is that?
Lover.
Yeah.
Heavy
Link
user.
that's we're
Addicted.
getting into other areas. But no, ever since I started doing PD with people and networking, just realizing that, you can grow your professional network through LinkedIn rather than add them all on Facebook because Facebook is still too personal for me. But can you tell us a little bit about the PD? Because I know you're a PD queen, just like you're a guide hog. I mean, kind of run down. This is a total question that I didn't prepare you for, so I'm sorry if you're kind of stuck. But just kind of run down some of the PD that has been paid for, because you don't pay for PD if you're overseas and you're at a great school. Can you tell us some of the things?
oh, I've done amazing PD. And I'm going to go back to this concept of when I was in my gap year taking care of horses. I still subscribed to all those organizations who would send me emails and, tweet and everything like WIDA, the Center for Applied Linguistics, TESOL. And even though I had shunned teaching and I was pretty sure I was going to become an, an exercise physiologist for horses, I would go down this rabbit hole. I'd get the emails and I would start reading it and be like, "Oh, this is a cool new thing. I want to learn about this." I even took a WIDA workshop when I wasn't teaching, and I was like, "Why are you doing that? You're not." It was free, but still. No, over the years, I think those regional conferences are awesome. I presented at the one in Chile when we hosted it. Now I just blanked on what that conference is, AMISA or something like that. What is it? South America? Anyway,
ASA,
thank you. Yes. And
the
oh my gosh,
South
Association
South
of
American
South
schools.
American Schools and
Mhm.
Associations, something like
yeah.
that. Yeah, ASA.
ASA does all kinds of really great PD, and a lot of it's free. They do all these online workshops. That was awesome when we were in Chile, especially during COVID. I did so much PD with them. Schools have paid for me to go to, I went to Taipei to do training with WIDA. I went to a WIDA symposium, which was spectacular, so amazing. I learned so much. Um, I went to
Can you
Washington.
tell me what WIDA is? Can you
Oh,
tell me what
WIDA,
WIDA
it
is?
used to stand for something, but now it's just WIDA. And
It
it's the,
used to stand for Wisconsin. The W was Wisconsin. As
was,
you can't believe it, but it was
yeah,
No way.
it was a consortium.
Wisconsin, Indiana, um, D. I can't remember. Yeah, but
It's a
it was like
consortium of
three
states that
states.
came together to build a framework for teaching and assessing students who are learning English. So,
So they would do these PDs at at an international school in another country that they had like links with, and they would offer PDs, and then the other international schools in the region would send their teachers and their staff to either present or listen or learn.
right,
They would pay to go to this regional, international part of WIDA, right?
exactly.
Is
Yeah,
is sort of what it is? Because in the States, they usually like in Wisconsin, when I was pre-teaching years, they had a different conference every week that you could go to with different districts. Anywhere in the state, every weekend was something, reading or language acquisition or something. I remember I missed it until I went overseas, because then overseas it was only once or twice a year with the big ones, like the regional conferences. But you present at them, and your school's been paying for some of these too, right?
yeah,
Is what you're saying?
absolutely.
Like the WIDA
In fact,
conference, you went to Taipei.
I just started this at this school. I've been there 3 months. But before I started, I wrote them and said, "Hey, there's this WIDA workshop I want to do. It costs $350. Will you pay for it now, even though I haven't started yet?" And they were like, "Sure." They said,
Wow.
just don't submit the reimbursement till after you actually start your job here.
Was
So
that in the summer, Sharon?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so oftentimes too that Sharon brings up a good point is that because when I was hired at TASM in the Middle East, I didn't have AP experience or training, and I was going to be an AP French teacher. So that summer, before I even moved to the school, they sent me to an AP workshop. They asked me like, "Where are you this summer? Where would you like to go?" And so I was in Canada. I picked Vermont and I went to, it was about 4 or 5 days in my summer. And it was nice, a nice little
mhm,
drive down to Vermont from Ottawa was okay. And they picked up the whole package.
yeah.
The transportation was my car, my rental. So they paid part of my rental. They paid the accommodation, the course. Then I got all this training before I even got to the school. And that was an indication of how great that school was, because they wanted to front load my arrival and make sure I was, hitting the ground running so that I could teach this course.
I think that's a really good point that when you are recruiting and looking at schools, the PD package is pretty important. So this school actually gives us a stipend every month for PD, and it's pretty significant. It adds up.
Every month?
Yeah. Yeah.
I've never
My
heard of
school
that.
has nothing right now. My school has nothing. I'm not joking.
Oh,
We used to go to NISA, but we don't anymore post COVID. They have not reinstated a whole lot of PD for us, and it's just something that goes on. Every school is different, and I guess that's my point. Because Sharon, if you've been to some great schools you have mentioned, and a lot of those are very long-standing, credited schools that have great packages and to ask about the PD. But in my experience, if I've gone to a fair, like I went to ASAD, I went down all the way down to Argentina, Buenos Aires, and did a presentation at mine. So the association gave me a break on the entire package. So I didn't have to pay the total fee.
Right.
Actually, the school didn't have to pay the total fee. I was also representing my international school down in Argentina. I was representing my school in Venezuela. For them, it's good PR that they send a teacher that may or may not know what he's talking about and do a presentation for other people,
Yeah,
right?
I know. It's so fun. It's such a fun way to meet people, learn about other schools, and learn stuff to help you become a better teacher. And yeah, it's great. I remember being at one conference and I met this guy who was the head of school at the Canadian school in Japan. I don't know what it's called. Kobe, the school in Kobe. And I just got it in my head. I was like, I'm going to get offered a job from that man before the end of this conference. It just became like my goal, you know? And by the time it was done, he said, Sharon, all I have is early years. Do you think you could teach early years? And I'm like, score. I was like, no way. I'm not going to teach early years, but I succeeded in getting a job offer. And that was all I really wanted to prove. So yeah, that was pretty awesome.
But you can file
Manifestation.
that away for later because that's part of the networking is you made sure that this guy knows who you are
Exactly.
or this woman, this director knew who you are,
Yeah.
and they're going to remember you down the line because the longer you're in this, and JP said this many times, the longer you're overseas in your career, the more people you know and the more the directors hear your name. So when recruiting time comes up, you're on their list because you know darn well they have a bucket list of people that they want to teach in their team at the right time when it happens. And sometimes it's just the timing.
Yeah.
So that person that you met and you got the offer from, they're still going to know who you are. So when you're
Yep.
looking around and you say, hey, oh, look, he's in Austria now. I'm going to tag him and see what happens. And you're going to go to Austria and work for this guy that you met at a conference in South America,
I love how
right?
we keep coming
10
back
years
to
ago.
Austria. It feels like it's my destiny now. So
I've
I'll
been
be
building
back.
that theme and I've been building that theme into this whole thing,
thank
keep
you.
talking about other things like equine, stuff and guitars. So I can just imagine you working in Austria with
Yeah,
horses
it's
and
all
your
there.
husband can build guitars.
It's perfect.
So Sharon, we're at the point in our interview where we want to know in all these travels, in all these countries, do you have a police story for us?
Oh, you know what? I only have one run in with the law, and it was just a traffic cop. But I think it's a kind of funny story. Okay.
Tell it.
Do you remember it, Jacqueline? It was from Turkey.
Oh my God, it's my favorite story ever. I tell this story.
No way.
No, you
I tell
can't.
this story.
Oh,
She's our
No,
guest.
no, I know, but I mean to say, I tell this story to everybody
oh,
I
maybe you're
talk
hyping
to.
it up too much. It's not that good. Okay.
No, no, it's awesome.
Okay. So a friend of ours had had surgery on her toe, and I was driving her home from the hospital, and we were just chatting. This is in Istanbul, and we were chatting, and I missed my exit. So I was like, dang it. So we had to exit at the next town, which was called Ahu Doodaloo, which is an awesome name, and it means with raspberries. So I always loved driving by Ahu Doodaloo, and every time I would go Ahu Doodaloo, and I drove by. So we had to exit at Ahu Doodaloo, and it turned out it had like this super long concrete barrier, so you couldn't turn around and get back on the highway. So we're driving, and then I see a few cars ahead of us are making a U-turn. So I made a U-turn. Turns out this traffic cop had pulled everybody over because it was an illegal U-turn. So I'm sitting there, the cop comes over. I spoke pretty decent Turkish, but I totally put on the expat, like, what? I didn't know. I can cry on command, and I don't know what you're talking about. And I could tell he was totally ready to let me go. Like, this is too much trouble. And then this man comes walking up who he had also been pulled over. And he goes, I speak English. Do you want me to translate? And I was like, no, dang it. No, I don't want you to translate. So I'm listening to him talking to the policeman, and he says to the guy says to the policeman, if you let her go, you have to let all of us go. I was like, ugh. So the cop feels like he has to give me a ticket. He takes my license. He's writing stuff down. He says something to the translator, and the translator says to me, is your name Organ Donor? And I'm like, Organ Donor? Oh, my driver's license says organ donor. So I'm like, why, yes, my name is Organ Donor. So the fine was something like $40, I don't know, but I was happily paying the fine because now I can tell everybody that in Ahu Doodaloo, they know me as Organ Donor. So that just made me so happy.
I'm speechless. I don't-
Because if you don't know, in Istanbul, Organ would be a name.
I
It's
know.
very, very, I mean, it's not common, but it would be a name. And doner is like the sandwich, it's the
Ah,
shawarma. So I always tell that story. I'm like, so my friend hands over her Kansas license and it says, okay, Miss Organ Doner.
I just loved that. Every time I drove by Ahu Doodaloo after that, I was like, hi guys, it's me,
I think that you need to have 2 cats, and you
Organ.
need to name one Ohan Udaloo, and the other one has gotta be Orgon Donor,
Okay.
right?
I love that.
That would be that would be just a lifestyle that I would want for myself
You're
too.
right. I
2
feel like I'm
cats with
gonna
those
do that.
names.
I'm gonna get 2 more animals just so I can do that. Yeah.
And now, speaking of animals and speaking of your kitty cats, or kitty cat, what are 3 things that you need to have to, because you've been all over the place, and I would imagine you have 3 top things that make your home a home, or 3 things that you absolutely need when you move into a country. Like
Mhm.
Greg needs ice, Greg needs a maid, and he needs some kind of transportation to and from school.
You know, that's a good question because this time was the first time in all of our years abroad I didn't get a shipment included in my compensation package. So normally we've hauled all of our stuff all over the world. We have a 20-foot container in storage, and normally it's with us wherever we live. So I don't have a lot of the stuff with me that makes my house feel like a home. So I would say first, my cat. She's been in 4 countries with me and definitely makes this feel homey. Then I would say I had to get a food processor as soon as I landed here because there are certain foods that make me feel comfortable. And I'm not a great cook, but I need my hummus and a few other things. And then, you know, I'm in a house that has white walls and white floors and white fixtures, and I'm used to these beautiful carpets and artwork and tapestries. Yes, like Jacqueline has. I mean, I lived in Turkey and China and I mean,
India.
Istanbul, India, and Shanghai. I got the most beautiful things. So I miss that. So here I did end up getting online. They have something similar to Amazon called Lazada. And I ordered this ridiculously bright colored carpet. And I was so excited. I was expecting to come home and find this big rolled up carpet at my house. And it ended up coming in a little folded packet because it's like a plastic mat with a
For
very
a mouse?
colorful design stamped on it. And I'm like, you know what? I don't care. Better than nothing. So
Make it work.
that's what we have. Yeah. So I would say my cat, my food processor, and something colorful and bright and cheerful. So yeah.
You've only been there for 3 months. When you guys arrived, you and your husband arrived with your cat. What?
Well, my
We
husband,
Oh,
arrived
they arrived
separately.
separately. When okay, so you arrived separately, went to different schools for now. It's a different part of your life. And when you arrived, did your school take care of you when you arrived? We like to talk a little bit about the onboarding package, which
yeah,
includes the very beginning when you land in country. What was it
absolutely.
like this time?
This was the best landing I've ever had in 22 years. This school took such good care of us. We have a boarding facility on campus, and we had the option to stay there. I had already picked a house, so they brought me directly to my house, and I was able to move in. But they picked me up for every meal and took me back to the boarding facility, breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day for 2 weeks. And in the meantime, some people didn't have housing yet. So they were taking people out to look for housing or to buy a scooter or go grocery shopping or whatever, they had several vans going all day long every day. They would take us to IKEA, to the grocery stores. It was amazing. They just took such good care of us. If I felt like I had my own personal assistant for 2 weeks. They gave us a care package at the house like a lot of schools do to get you started with basic necessities. It was amazing. And you know what else I really appreciated was the whole senior admin team was there. They met us at the airport. They came to every meal. They I mean, they just felt so present, like they really, really cared about us, and that made a huge difference. I told them that, when you feel like your admin team came back early just to greet the newbies, like, that sends a really important message. So, I felt very valued and really, really happy with that. Such a nice way to start a new job.
And my whole theory about this is that it shows that you are a very, very important investment for the school. They want you to stay longer than 2 years. They'll talk about like, no, you need to stay for like 4 or 5, right? Your contract is for 2. You show up and they're all waiting for you. It shows you they feel you're important enough that you have food, communication, and you feel within the first 2 weeks that you're there before school starts that you get settled in somehow. So they help you with, and there's different styles for every school. They do it differently, right? Some schools just plop you in a hotel and you have to find a place to live on your own with some realtor. Other places have a place that you have to stay because that's where their housing is. So every school's different. I love hearing your story because that is the pinnacle, and I think schools are learning this. I think the admin are finally figuring out. We've been screaming for years that the onboarding process, the first moment they get off the plane, is going to make it or break it for a teacher. I've seen a teacher leave within 3 days of arrival.
Yeah.
We lost a teacher one year at one school in 3 days.
And
And it
why
was
was that,
because,
Greg?
well, she was just a little bit crazy,
Was it
right?
a
It
bad
wasn't.
fit? Was it not
Yes, you're getting me to say that she was not the right fit for the school, or the school was not the right fit for her, or the country was not the right fit. She didn't ask the right questions during the interview process.
Mm.
She was thinking of something else, but whatever it was, gone in 3 days. And I think it's so important for schools to know that it doesn't matter if you're a big school with a big budget for onboarding, it doesn't matter. Even a small school, if that director shows up to pick you up at the tiny little airport that they have, it means everything to an arriving teacher, right?
Yeah,
And
it's a
you guys would
familiar
agree with me.
face from your interview process. I've got to think about it. So one, two. So my first two international schools, it was the person that I interviewed with who was there at the airport greeting
Fantastic.
me, and I stayed 15 years at those two schools.
Yeah.
And then from that point on, it became HR people that I didn't know, like they just had a sign or they were looking for me because I kind of stand out with the red hair, usually in these Asian countries that I stand out. So they come up to me, but I don't know who they are. They're like, "Hi, is it Jacqueline?" And yeah, who are you? But it means so much when you can see a familiar face in a sea of faces that you don't know.
Mhm, mhm.
On the other hand, if you have an experience where you show up at a small school you don't know much about and you're starting out teaching, it might be an experience that's a challenge. You might arrive and there's no one there and you have a phone number, but you don't have a phone. Your cell phone doesn't work. You come from
Mhm.
your home country thinking that you're going to pop in a sim, something goes wrong, your baggage doesn't show up, you're in the middle of an airport, they haven't found you, maybe they're discombobulated, maybe they don't have good communication. You might find yourself at a remote airport that closes down while you're standing there, and you'd have to, you'll have a story to tell.
Yep.
But I think a lot of us that are willing to travel are going to go into these kinds of stories and then come on to the ITP and share those stories and how it just changed their life, right? But I think the point is that the better schools, the schools that you could even ask these questions, like, what's the onboarding like when I land?
Yep.
These are good questions for an interview these days
That's a good
because
point.
other
I never
schools don't
thought of
do it.
asking that. Yeah.
Well, once you've done it for a while, once you've been overseas like we have for so many schools and stuff, we sort of feel more comfortable just sort of relying on the fact that they're going to pick us up, but that's sort of an assumption on our part. So I think if we include that in the interview process, it's a really good question.
Yeah.
I've never written down all the great questions because every school's different
Mhm.
and you have a different feeling when you interview with that school. But one of those basic ones would probably be, you know, who's going to meet me at the airport and what's the process?
Yeah.
Well,
Do you
and
have a
just to be
plan?
clear, this would be a question after you got an offer, not before.
That's true.
Because that
That's
would be sort of
true.
putting the horse after the cart or the cart before the horse. You don't want to, like, very first interview, they say, "So, can you tell us why you applied to our school?" And it's like, "Well, can I just find out what's the onboarding?"
Are you
Like,
gonna
you're
feed
already
me?
going.
You're gonna feed me every day for 2 weeks? I need that. Yeah.
Oh, there's so many things we could talk about. Sharon, you've been on this show quite a while with us now. How about if we sort of wrap it up and we give you an opportunity to sort of give us your last thoughts or last
What?
story or something that you'd like to leave us with?
Oh, goodness.
Or advice. You could also give advice because our listeners are from all over. Let me just kind of run down some of the
Oh,
listeners that
yes.
have reached out to me
Okay.
at my services. So they are first time teachers, so they're just about to graduate from university, and they decided, like Greg, I don't even want to teach in the US, I want to head overseas.
Mhm.
Then there are people that have been teachers forever in the US or in Canada or in Australia. I've actually got quite a few of Australian clients that are teachers only in Australia, and they've decided, maybe as a result of this ITP, they want to go overseas.
Mhm.
So we've got the whole gamut.
That's
What
cool.
would be something you'd want to tell those people?
Okay, since I'm new here, this is fresh on my mind. I think even though we've been doing this for 22 years and this is my 6th school, transitions are hard. Even though my landing was soft and the school took really, really good care of me, there's still a very steep learning curve. I mean, it's a new language, it's a culture I'm not familiar with. The school has systems I don't know, or they don't have systems in place. Like there's just stuff to learn, right? And I think that when you're new at a school, it can be very easy to get demoralized as soon as that honeymoon period wears off. And I guess the advice I would give is hang in there. From my experience, if you can make it to Christmas, and often earlier than Christmas, but if you aim for Christmas, the second semester is like a whole different world. And you're like, I'm not new anymore. I know what I'm doing. And then the next year, when you're really not a newbie and the new people come in, it's like the best feeling in the world. So I guess that would be my advice right now because it's fresh on my mind is to just hang in there, power through. It's going to be awesome. So
Oh, those are great words of wisdom. I think for no matter how long you've been teaching, because you've been doing it for 22 years overseas, and you know what it feels like in many situations, right? I totally agree with you. I couldn't have said it any better.
awesome. Well, this has been
Yay.
so fun, you guys. And you know what? I didn't even get to touch base about some of the things. Like Greg, I heard you say that your nephew was in Hadestown, and I was like, like I'm a total theater nerd, and I just got goosebumps thinking about that. That was awesome. So
Do you get to go to a lot of theater? Are you involved in theater at any of the schools you've been at
you know,
over the years? Have you been able to?
I just went to see West Side Story that was touring here. We went to see it last weekend, which was fun. But in general, there hasn't been a lot of that going on at most of the places where I've lived. I mean, I go to the high school productions and I
Right, and the most of
help
the
with
schools have
those.
productions, that was my point.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, most of the schools try to have some kind of a drama, theater,
right, right,
arts,
right.
production
Yeah.
at least once in the year,
Yep, and I usually
right?
get involved in that somehow. But, it's not the same as seeing a real off-Broadway show or something.
Yeah, well, just so our listeners know, yes, I have a nephew. His name is Colin and Lemoyne, and you need to look for him in the off Broadway of Hadestown. He is one of the swing actors, which means he goes through all different parts. It's a very small
Mm.
cast, but he's also a stand-in for one of the leads, and you might see him as the lead. He's amazing. I saw him twice in Houston. It was amazing and I can't I mean, not in Houston, it was in, Fort Worth. I thought it was in Houston, so I almost went to the wrong city. But anyway, that's a great point. But I think, Sharon, on behalf of JP and I, we need to get you back on the show later on after you've been in Bangkok
Oh,
for a while.
thank you. I
We'll
love
talk
that.
later about that. We'll share some stories. And JP, you want to bring us to a close?
Well, from Greg, the single guy, and JP Mint, I want to thank Sharon for coming on to the show today and sharing all these wonderful stories. I think I'm inspired, and I don't even teach anymore. But she's just a an elixir of positive juice that I want to go overseas and experience everything thanks to her.
Thank you,
Oh,
Sharon.
you're the
Yeah.
best. Thank you for those kind words. And it's been so fun chatting with you guys. I feel like we should just sit down and get a beer and hang out.
Oh, I would love one. Before we leave, last thing before we leave, Sharon, can you tell us the name of that place again? The Hoopla Hoopla?
Oh,
That's
Are you?
from your
Ahu
story.
Doodaloo.
Ahu doodaloo, everybody,
I
from
think
the ITP.
that's gonna be our sign off from now on.
Sharon,
Hallelujah.
Sharon, can you stay up for just a little bit? I'm going to get